The cold, bioluminescent chamber shook as the alien queen's tentacles whipped through the air, slamming against the crystalline walls. "Stop! I command you!" she roared, her voice a deep resonance that vibrated through the air, rattling the minds of all who stood near. Her daughter, a young hybrid with strange, shimmering scales that reflected the light like liquid silver, stood frozen in the center of the chaos. Her small hands, trembling, were pressed against the metallic floor. And then she said it. "Father." The word cut through the air like a laser. The queen froze. Her many eyes widened until they almost seemed too large for her elongated head. Every pulse in the chamber stopped, and even the faint hum of the air system seemed to fade. "Father." Her daughter, barely half-grown, took a hesitant step toward the human standing behind the observation window, the man who had been studying their species for years. She looked at him with the trust and innocence that should have belonged only to her mother. Why does my daughter call you that?" the queen hissed, her voice trembling not with anger but something closer to fear, a fear she had never known in her centuries of life. The human swallowed hard. He had expected curiosity, he had expected caution, he had not expected this. His heart pounded in his chest as he glanced at the tiny alien child who had somehow bridged the impossible gap between two species. She calls me father because I've been there," he said quietly, almost ashamed of how simple it sounded. "Because I saved her and she trusts me." The queen's mind raced. Her species had survived countless wars, evolved beyond recognition, and mastered technologies that made stars tremble in their orbits. Yet she could not comprehend this. Her child, her blood, her future heir had chosen him. The chamber trembled again, but this time it was not the alien machinery. It was her own heartbeat, pounding like a drum of war. Tentacles curled around her throne, gripping the edges until the crystal cracked under the pressure. She had been trained to expect loyalty, to demand obedience. And yet, here was her daughter, defying her in a way she could not strike or suppress. I raised her," the human continued, stepping closer to the window. His voice was steady now, full of quiet determination. "I didn't want her to die. I didn't want her to grow up afraid. I protected her, and she knows it." The queen's head tilted, her mandibles clicking softly, a sound that was almost the alien equivalent of a sigh. Memories surged unbidden, of her daughter falling ill, of her daughter crying in her arms, of countless battles fought to keep her alive. And yet, she had never seen that trust in anyone but herself. The little hybrid shifted slightly, as if sensing her mother's turmoil. She stepped closer to the human, reaching a delicate hand toward the glass. "Father," she repeated, softer this time, almost a plea. "Come with me." The queen's tentacles froze mid-motion. She wanted to roar. She wanted to tear the human apart for daring to steal her child's affection. She wanted to understand, but words failed her. Her mind, trained for centuries in strategy and conquest, had no answer for this. And then, for the first time in her immortal life, she felt it. Doubt. Doubt that she could protect her daughter as this human had. Doubt that her daughter's heart belonged solely to her. Doubt that she had truly given her child what she needed most. She looked down at her daughter, and for a moment, all the fear and anger melted into a cold, unyielding ache. This human, fragile and mortal, had done what she could not. He had given her child love. Tentacles slowly lowering, the queen allowed herself a silent question. Not for the human, not for anyone but herself. Can I ever be enough? The child's eyes shimmered with hope, and the human smiled gently, knowing the battle was not over, but that something remarkable had already begun. And in the shadows, the queen realized that the war she had been fighting her entire life, against enemies, against fate, against the stars themselves, was nothing compared to the war within her own heart. The queen retreated to the shadowed alcove of her chamber, her many eyes narrowing as she observed her daughter and the human from a distance. Every movement they made was a dagger to her pride, a reminder that her control was no longer absolute. For centuries, she had commanded loyalty through fear and respect alike. Yet here, in this quiet corner of her empire, her daughter had chosen a mortal, a human. The child's small voice called again, "Father, please come closer." The queen's mandibles clicked sharply, a sound of frustration and disbelief. She wanted to lash out, to snatch her daughter back into her tentacled embrace, but something inside her restrained her. She had been trained to destroy threats without hesitation. This was a threat unlike any she had ever faced, a threat of love. The human pressed his hand to the glass, the strange warmth of his touch radiating even through the barrier. "I won't hurt her," he whispered. "I only want her to be safe. I've never done anything else." The queen's chest pulsed, her many hearts beating erratically. Safety. The word struck her like a blade. She had always believed that survival was all her daughter needed. Food, strength, protection from enemies. But this human, he offered more than survival. He offered care, guidance, and the one thing she had never understood how to give fully, trust. For the first time, she felt a creeping uncertainty. Could she truly provide for her daughter in the way this human did without violence or fear? Could her child's future, her legacy, truly belong to someone else? "Mother," the young hybrid's voice trembled. She had noticed the hesitation now, the silence behind the throne. "Are you angry?" The queen froze, caught in the web of conflicting emotions. Anger, fear, jealousy. Could she even name what she felt? She had faced countless alien civilizations, conquered entire star systems, yet she could not face this simple truth. Her daughter's heart might not belong to her. "I am not angry," she lied, her voice a low, vibrating hum. "I am considering your choices." The child's eyes flicked toward her, searching. And in that moment the queen saw something that pierced through her armor, hope, pure, fragile hope. Hope that perhaps, despite the centuries of tradition, despite her immense power, there could be something more, something human. She stepped closer, letting a single tendril brush against the crystalline wall. "Tell me," she said softly, her voice almost unheard over the hum of the chamber. "Why does he deserve to be called father?" The human's gaze met hers through the glass, steady and calm. "Because he saved her when no one else could. Because he stayed when everything else abandoned her. Because he listened, taught, comforted, and never asked for anything in return." The queen felt a flicker of something she could not identify. Gratitude? Anger? Perhaps even shame. Her species had always measured value by strength, by dominance, by survival. Yet here was a mortal man, fragile and short-lived, who had accomplished what she could not. He had earned her daughter's love without a single battle, without a single threat. The chamber grew quiet, as if the universe itself had paused to witness this unthinkable defiance. And the queen realized that this human, in his vulnerability, had achieved the impossible. He had proven the worth of compassion, patience, and selflessness, the qualities her people had dismissed for centuries as weaknesses. "Then he truly deserves her trust?" she asked, her many eyes fixed on her daughter. "More than anyone," the child answered, stepping closer to the glass. She pressed her tiny hand against it, a mirror of the humans. "He is my father, mother. He saved me. He loves me." The queen's hearts faltered. Love. She had commanded empires, destroyed enemies, and conquered worlds, yet she could not create love where it mattered most. And in that realization, something shifted. The queen had a choice. She could retreat into pride and tradition, enforcing obedience through fear and authority. Or she could step into something new, terrifying, and unknown, something human. A distant alarm blared across the chamber, snapping her back to reality. Enemy vessels were approaching. Her empire demanded her attention, her wrath, her strength. The familiar call of duty, of war, surged through her veins, but so did the fragile, impossible pulse of what she had just witnessed. And in the quiet of the chamber, with her daughter staring at her with unblinking eyes and the human waiting patiently beyond the glass, the queen realized that the greatest battle of her life was no longer against the stars. It was within her own heart. She exhaled a shuddering breath, the tension in her tentacles easing ever so slightly. "Perhaps," she murmured to herself, "there is more to being a mother than I ever imagined." The human gave a faint nod, understanding that the fight had only just begun. But that trust, once earned, could bridge even the widest chasms between species. And for the first time, the alien queen wondered if she could survive not just as a ruler, but as a parent. The council chamber was a storm of whispers and agitation. Hundreds of advisors, generals, and elders of the queen's species filled the room, their many eyes gleaming with suspicion and outrage. Screens flickered with live feeds of the human and the young hybrid, showing them moving freely outside the queen's protective orbit. Mother, one advisor hissed, this human cannot be allowed to influence the air. He is mortal, weak, and fragile. He will ruin everything we have built. The queen's tentacles twitched in irritation. She had anticipated this. For centuries, her species had measured the worth of all beings by strength, cunning, and dominance. Humans had always been dismissed as insignificant, fragile creatures, soft, emotional, and fleeting. Yet here was a human who had done the impossible. He had earned her daughter's trust and affection. Enough, she said, her voice a commanding hum that silenced the room. Do not speak of my child's heart as though it is yours to command. Murmurs rose, but no one dared challenge her further. The queen turned, her gaze narrowing as she looked at the display of her daughter smiling at the human. Something inside her, a mix of fear and awe, pulled tight like a coiled spring. Mother, the young hybrid's voice rang in her mind through the neural bond she had instinctively shared with her child since birth. Why do they all look so angry? What have I done wrong? The queen's chest pulsed with an unfamiliar ache. You have done nothing wrong, she whispered almost to herself. You have simply chosen what is right for you. But right was a dangerous word in her world. Right was not determined by heart or love. It was determined by survival, by lineage, by conquest. Choosing the human risked everything. Mother, the human's voice echoed in the chamber's communications line, calm and steady. I know your people fear me. I know I am weak, short-lived. But I have done what you could not. I have kept her safe when all else failed. That is worth more than power, more than strength, more than centuries of conquest. The queen froze. He spoke not in defiance, but in quiet conviction, the very thing that made her daughter's eyes light up with trust. He had no weapons, no armies, no overwhelming force, yet he stood taller than any general in the room. Her advisors muttered again, urging her to enforce tradition, to remove the human, to remind the child that blood and strength mattered above all else. But she could not. She found herself thinking not of her empire, not of her legacy, but of the small hand that had pressed against the glass, reaching for the human's warmth. You would risk my empire for a human, one elder demanded, incredulous, for a creature whose barely brushes the edge of our history. The queen's eyes blazed. Do not misunderstand, she said. I risk nothing that my daughter's heart has chosen freely. I will not force loyalty. I will not demand obedience. If my empire falls because I honor her trust, then so be it. At least she will know love. A tense silence filled the chamber. The humans of history had always been dismissed as fragile and unworthy, and yet this one had achieved what her empire could not, the heart of a child. The young hybrid's thoughts reached her mother again. Do you not care that they will fight you? Her chest ached. She had faced war before, countless enemies, countless threats, but this was different. This battle was not fought with weapons. It was fought with patience, vulnerability, and the courage to stand for what one believed in. She was afraid, terribly afraid. Yet she also felt a spark of something long buried, pride. Pride not in power or conquest, but in her daughter's capacity to love, and in the human who had proven that love could be stronger than any empire. The chamber's alarms blared suddenly. A fleet of hostile vessels had appeared on the edge of their star system, sensing weakness in the queen's moment of hesitation. Her advisors scrambled, demanding her command, but she held up a tentacle. Prepare defenses, she said finally, her voice steady. But know this, no threat, alien or human, will touch my daughter while I draw breath, and this human, he stands as her protector. Do not interfere, this I command. Even the elders blinked in shock. Never had a queen her counsel so openly. Never had she declared that trust and love mattered more than the cold logic of power. The human looked at the child, then at the queen's transmission, his face a mixture of awe and cautious relief. Thank you, he whispered. I will not fail her. And the young hybrid smiled, a tiny, shimmering light in a galaxy of darkness, her tiny hand still reaching for the one who had earned her heart. The queen's many eyes softened. For the first time in centuries, she wondered what it would mean to rule differently, not just with strength, but with care. Not just with fear, but with respect for the choices of those she loved. Outside, the enemy fleet moved closer. Inside, the queen faced the more terrifying challenge, learning to trust, and perhaps even to love in a way she had never imagined possible. The war of the stars would come, but the war of the heart that was just beginning. The void of space trembled with the approach of enemy ships, their jagged hulls reflecting distant starlight like shards of broken glass. Inside the Queen's flagship, alarms screamed, casting the chamber in red light. Her tentacles lashed across the control panels, each movement precise, commanding the ship's defenses with centuries of instinct. Yet her mind kept returning to the same thought, echoing louder than any alarm, her daughter. "Mother, will he be okay?" The hybrid's small voice was sharp with worry, though the child stood bravely at the observation window beside the human. Her silver scales flickered nervously in the light, mirroring the rising tension of the chamber. "He will be," the Queen said firmly, her voice steady even as her hearts thudded in anxious rhythm. "He is not like other humans. He is stronger than he seems." The human glanced at her, understanding more than words could convey. He stepped closer to the child, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I promise to keep you safe," he whispered, "no matter what comes." The Queen's mandibles clicked sharply. Promise. Such a fragile word for such a fragile being, but somehow he made it weighty. Somehow he made it feel unbreakable. The first attack struck without warning. Pulses of energy lanced through space, tearing through the outer shields. Explosions rocked the flagship, sending tremors that rattled the crystal walls. The hybrid clutched the human's arm, her tiny claws digging into his sleeve, but she did not scream. She did not run. The Queen's tentacles moved with precision, launching countermeasures, deflecting beams, and shunting power to the shields. She was a master of war, a commander who had never known defeat. Yet the real challenge lay not in strategy, but in protecting her child without crushing her trust. "Mother, what do we do?" the hybrid cried, her voice trembling over the alarm. "Stay behind me," the Queen barked, though she knew her words were more ritual than instruction. This was not a drill, and staying behind her did not guarantee safety. The human drew a deep breath and stepped forward. "I can help," he said. "Let me guide her, let me." "Stay," the Queen roared. Tentacles snapped toward the controls, redirecting the ship's main turrets to intercept the incoming assault. "This is my battle." The human froze, understanding the weight behind her words. She was not simply defending her child. She was defending the right to choose, the fragile trust that had formed between species that should never have been allies. Explosions shook the observation window, and the hybrid clung to the human instinctively, pressing her small body against him. She whispered softly, "Father, please." The Queen's many eyes narrowed. The human had earned her daughter's trust, and now he was asking for her protection to allow him to act. Could I let him? The thought terrified her. But she also understood that if she refused, she would risk the trust she had so carefully begun to nurture. Tentacles hesitated, heartbeats faltered, and then slowly she stepped back from the human's side, giving him space. "Do not fail her," she murmured, not to him, but to the universe itself. With a surge of energy, the human lifted the child carefully, maneuvering through the trembling chamber with precision. Using the ship's internal defenses as cover, he led her toward the emergency shuttle bay, a small vessel she had never seen before. The Queen watched every step, calculating, adjusting shields, directing turrets, all while suppressing the storm in her chest. Pride, fear, and a strange, new feeling, hope, wove together, knotting tight around her hearts. The hybrid looked up at her mother, her eyes wide and trusting. "Mother, you will be okay, won't you?" The Queen's mandibles clicked softly, a sound almost like a sigh. "I will survive," she said, "but this you must choose for yourself." The human nodded at her, acknowledging the unspoken alliance. With the child in his arms, he activated the shuttle, engines glowing, and launched into the chaos of space. Enemy fire streaked past, deflected and absorbed by the flagship's shields. For a moment, the Queen felt an unfamiliar emptiness. The child she had sworn to protect was leaving her side, yet not out of fear, but out of trust. The human had earned it. She realized then that trust was more fragile than any shield and more powerful than any weapon. As the shuttle vanished into the dark expanse, the Queen's tentacles tightened around the control panels. "Hold them," she muttered to herself. "Hold them until she returns safely." Her empire would come under attack, her fleet would fight and burn, and the stars themselves seemed to tremble. But one truth had crystallized in her mind. The human had proven himself, not with armies, not with weapons, but with courage, patience, and love. And for the first time in centuries, the Queen felt something she had never thought possible: pride in a human. The shuttle drifted through the debris-strewn void, its engines glowing faintly against the black canvas of space. The hybrid clutched the human's arm tightly, her small body tense with fear, yet her eyes never left his face. She trusted him completely, and that trust radiated in a way the Queen could never have commanded through centuries of rule. "We'll be safe here," the human whispered, voice calm but firm. "I promise." The child nodded, shivering slightly, and tucked herself closer. "Father, why do you stay with me even though you could leave?" The human looked at her, eyes soft but unwavering. "Because I care more about you than my own safety. You're my daughter in every way that matters." The words hit her like a ripple through her scales. They were simple, human, almost too fragile to bear, yet perfect. She leaned against him, letting the warmth and steadiness of his presence fill the void of space around them. Back aboard the flagship, the Queen stood rigidly on her command platform, overseeing the battle. Shields flared as enemy vessels attacked relentlessly, yet she remained composed. Her tentacles danced across the controls, her mind a storm of strategy and anxiety. Advisors and generals clustered around, their faces grim. "Mother," one hissed, "we cannot continue like this. The human has taken the air. It is a betrayal of tradition. He is not one of us. If we allow this, the empire will crumble." The Queen's many eyes glimmered, cold and unyielding. "He is not my subject," she said, voice low but ironclad. "He is the one who has earned her trust, and I will not punish loyalty, not when it is genuine, not when it is love." Whispers filled the room, a storm of disbelief and outrage. To choose the human over centuries of lineage and obedience was unthinkable, yet the Queen did not waver. She had seen what this man had done. She had witnessed the courage in his eyes, the patience in his hands, and the bond he shared with her daughter. The battle raged, but in the quiet of her thoughts, the Queen realized something profound. For all her empire, all her armies, and all her conquests, she had never commanded the most important loyalty of all: her daughter's heart. She had never understood that love, trust freely given, could surpass power, that it could shape decisions more forcefully than fear or duty. Meanwhile, in the shuttle, the human maneuvered the small craft with precision, weaving through asteroid fields and debris from the battle. The hybrid watched him, awe and admiration mingling with fear. "You saved me," she whispered, "even when everyone else was fighting, even when it was dangerous." The human smiled faintly. "I couldn't let anyone hurt you. You're my daughter. I won't ever stop protecting you." Her eyes filled with tears, bright silvery tears that shimmered in the dim light. I love you, Father," she said softly. The words struck deep, echoing across the void, powerful enough to ripple even through the Queen's fortified heart. She realized then that what this human had built with her child was unshakable. No council, no fleet, no empire could undo it. Back on the flagship, the Queen's eyes followed the shuttle on her screens. She felt the sting of emptiness, but also a strange warmth. She had given her child the choice, and her child had chosen freely. For the first time, she understood that parenting was not about control. It was about courage, the courage to step back and trust. The battle continued, but she was calm, focused. She had faced enemies who wielded lasers, bombs, and fleets. Now she was facing the hardest challenge of all: allowing love to thrive where tradition demanded fear. Suddenly, the communication system chimed. The human's voice crackled through, steady and confident. "We're safe for now. Thank you for trusting me. I won't fail her." The Queen's hearts thudded in response, heavy with emotion she could not name. Pride, fear, hope, and a deep, unshakable respect. That fragile human had earned what she had never fully given, her trust. Her advisors muttered again, but she ignored them. She had made her choice. Love, trust, and courage had won, not domination, not strength, not fear. And somewhere in the shuttle, her daughter slept, her hand resting against the human's chest, trusting him completely. For the first time, the queen realized that the empire she had built was not her greatest legacy. Her greatest legacy could be this: the courage to let someone else be her child's protector, the courage to honor trust, even when it's tradition. The stars outside the viewport shone cold and distant, yet inside the queen's heart, a warmth spread, a promise, a possibility, a future she had never imagined. Her daughter was alive, she was safe, and she had chosen freely. And that was victory enough. The flagship floated in the aftermath of battle, scorched metal and broken hulls floating like silent ghosts in the void. The enemy fleet had retreated, unable to pierce the Queen's defenses, yet the cost had been high. Ships were lost, shields had faltered, and the Council's murmurs had turned into a storm of outrage. Inside the command chamber, the Queen stood tall, her many eyes scanning the damage reports. Tentacles coiled tightly around the control console, but her mind was not on the numbers. It was on her daughter, on the small human-shielded vessel that had carried her child safely away. One of her most trusted generals approached cautiously, his compound eyes flickering with anger. "Mother," he said, voice low but urgent, "you tradition. You allowed a human, an outsider, to take the air. The Council will not accept this. There will be rebellion. Your rule, your legacy, all are at risk." The Queen turned to him slowly, her gaze sharp but unflinching. "And yet she lives," she said, her voice low, resonant. "She lives and she trusts him. That is more than any legacy built on fear could accomplish. More than obedience, more than conquest. Tell me, General, which is the greater victory, a child who obeys or a child who chooses?" The general faltered, unsure how to respond. He had fought beside her for centuries, yet he had never faced this. A leader who valued trust over tradition, who put love above empire. The Queen's mandibles clicked softly, a sound almost like contemplation. "The choice I made will shake the empire," she continued. "Yes, they may resent me, they may oppose me, but I will not turn away from what is right, not for fear, not for pride." Across the void, in the small shuttle, the human guided the hybrid through asteroid fields, weaving carefully to avoid the remnants of the battle. She clung to him, still trembling, but her eyes were alight with wonder. "Father, will Mother forgive you?" she asked softly. The human glanced at her, catching her gaze with steady reassurance. "Your mother, she's strong, she's proud. She'll understand in her own time. Right now we need to focus on keeping you safe. That's what matters most." The child leaned against him, trusting him completely. I love you," she whispered again, as if the words gave her strength. Back on the flagship, the Queen's thoughts returned to that declaration. Love, a concept her people had often dismissed as weakness. And yet here it was, the force that had won her daughter's heart and the loyalty of someone she had once thought insignificant. The Council called for a formal session, and the Queen knew the confrontation was unavoidable. Hundreds of voices would demand obedience, loyalty, and tradition. Many would call her a traitor to her lineage. Yet she could not turn back. She had made a choice that went beyond empire, beyond conquest, beyond centuries of rules and expectations. "Let them come," she murmured to herself, her hearts beating in steady defiance. "Let them speak of loyalty and blood. I have witnessed loyalty that transcends fear. I have witnessed love that conquers even the impossible. And I will not forget it, not now, not ever." The alarms of rebellion had already begun. Messages from the Council, whispers of dissent, fleets moving without orders. But the Queen did not flinch. She knew she faced not just external enemies, but internal ones. And yet she felt something she had never felt before: calm certainty. Somewhere in the shuttle, her daughter slept peacefully, protected by a human who had earned her trust. And that was proof enough. The Queen turned back to the viewport, gazing at the distant stars, the battlefield now silent. For centuries, she had ruled with unmatched power, crushing enemies, bending worlds to her will. Yet now she realized that the greatest strength was not in domination, it was in courage. Courage to trust, courage to let go, courage to honor love. And she knew, deep in the core of her being, that no empire, no council, no force in the galaxy could undo what had been built between her child and the human. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope, not just for survival, not just for victory, but for something far greater. The possibility that her daughter's heart, freely given, could define the future in a way she never could. And in that hope, she found a quiet power that no fleet, no council, no weapon could ever match. The council chamber was silent, yet every eye burned with expectation. Hundreds of advisors, generals, and elders waited, their compound eyes flickering with suspicion, disbelief, and fear. The queen stood at the center, tall and unyielding, her tentacles coiled with controlled power. She had faced entire star systems, conquered worlds, and commanded empires, but this confrontation was unlike any she had known. A voice hissed from the back of the chamber. "Mother, you allowed an outsider to take the air. This human, he is weak, mortal, fleeting. You have dishonored the throne, the lineage, and the empire." The queen's many eyes scanned the room, and for a heartbeat, she allowed herself to feel the weight of every word. Then she spoke, her voice cutting through the chamber like a sharpened blade. "He is not weak. He is stronger than many of you ever will be. He has earned my daughter's trust, her love, and her loyalty. That is strength you cannot measure in fleets, weapons, or fear. That is strength beyond conquest. That is humanity." A ripple of shock ran through the council. For centuries, their species had dismissed humans as fragile, unworthy, incapable of greatness. Yet here was a living proof challenging every assumption they had held. The queen's gaze softened as she thought of her daughter, the small, shimmering hybrid who had trusted the human without hesitation. "I have seen what courage truly means," the queen continued, her voice steadier now, filled with quiet authority. "I have seen what loyalty truly means, and I have seen what love can accomplish, even across species. This human has protected my daughter when I could not, and for that he deserves my respect, and hers." The council erupted in murmurs, some defiant, some awed. Few could deny the evidence before them. The human had proven himself not with brute force, but with courage, care, and patience. At that moment, the communications system crackled. The queen's eyes widened as the shuttle carrying her daughter appeared on the viewport, gliding safely through space. The child's eyes sparkled as she looked at her mother's transmission. "Mother," she called, "I am safe because of him, because of father." The queen's heart surged. She had feared losing her daughter to a mortal, to a creature she had once considered inferior. And yet, seeing her child's trust so complete, so unshakable, she realized that she had gained something far greater than obedience or fear, the chance to see her daughter flourish in love and freedom. Tentacles unfurled slowly, almost reverently. "Return to us," the queen commanded, her voice ringing with authority, pride, and newfound understanding. "Both of you, come home." The shuttle slowed, docking carefully with the flagship. The hybrid ran into her mother's embrace, the human following closely behind. The queen's eyes softened as her child pressed herself against her, shining scales brushing against armored tentacles. "You were right," the queen whispered almost to herself. "Love and trust are stronger than I imagined." The human bowed slightly, careful but respectful, and met the queen's many eyes. "Thank you," he said simply, "for trusting me." The queen nodded, her mandibles clicking softly, a sound of acceptance, respect, and something almost like gratitude. "Not just me," she replied, "for my daughter, and for proving that humanity can be extraordinary." The council remained silent, many still unsure how to reconcile centuries of tradition with this unexpected truth. But the queen did not falter. She had made her choice, and the results spoke louder than any argument. Her daughter was alive, happy, and whole. Her trust had been honored. And for the first time, the alien queen understood that humanity's greatest power was not in strength or weaponry, but in the courage to care, to protect, and to love, even in the face of impossibility. The child looked up at her mother and then at the human, smiling with the unshakable certainty of youth. "Mother," she said softly, "he is my father, and you are my queen." The queen felt a warmth spread through her heart, a mixture of pride, relief, and a deep, unyielding love. Tentacles coiled around her child, gentle now, protective but free. The empire could wait. Battles could be fought later. For now, the greatest victory had been won, not with armies, not with fleets, not with fear, but with trust, courage, and the undeniable strength of humanity. And in that quiet, shining moment, the alien queen knew she had witnessed something eternal, the extraordinary power of a human heart. The stars outside seemed to shine a little brighter, as if recognizing the truth that had been proven across the void. Love, trust, and courage could bridge worlds, species, and lifetimes. And the galaxy would never be the same.